What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to America's Finest Sports. And also, this is being double broadcasted onto TTB Ravens Media as well. None of you got to see this, but we set a 30-second timer, and Matt still had some stuff to do. So he was running in the background as that 30-second timer was going down. It was pretty funny to watch. But overall, tonight, we're going to be talking with a heavy Ravens focus. And if you guys are coming from TTB, the goal, we want to try and hit 100 subs on AFS tonight. We're at around like 85, I want to say. So only about 15 subs needed to get there. But we're going to be having a heavy Ravens focus tonight. We're going to be talking about, obviously, we're going to start off with Lamar Jackson. Talk about his comeback player of the year potential, just the way that he's going to be able to come back into this offense. Then we're going to be talking about overall bounce back season teams, starting off with the Baltimore Ravens. And then finally, we're going to be talking about rookies that are in a position to succeed in that rookie year that people aren't talking about, highlighted by none other than Mr. Isaiah Likely. So heavy Ravens focus. We're really excited to be doing this tonight. But, starting off with Lamar Jackson, Matt, I know you're a huge Lamar Jackson fan, even though you're a 49ers fan. What are your kind of thoughts on Lamar Jackson coming into this year from a less biased perspective, I'll say, than myself?
So I'm very excited for this season just because we've heard a lot of Lamar Jackson slander this offseason. And basically, since he was hurt last year, just everything's very, very negative when it comes to Lamar Jackson. And we've seen Lamar Jackson on the field. Obviously, all of the Ravens fans, you guys are locked into it, but I'm a big Lamar fan, so I pretty much watch like almost all the Ravens games. He's been fantastic. This idea that he hasn't played well or that he was having a bad season last year is just not accurate whatsoever. So when I'm looking into this season, I remember that when Lamar was hurt last year, when he was hurt in the pocket, actually, let's emphasize that, the Ravens were the 1 seed. And Lamar Jackson was playing with basically Mark Andrews, Hollywood Brown, no offensive line. He had a tackle that couldn't block for maybe a second and a half in Villanueva. Just not a very good team around him. No running backs, literally practice squad running backs every single week, signing guys off the street. And he was still coming back and winning games when they were down 2-3 scores. It was a remarkable season up to that point. And a few weeks in, me and you talked about it, and we knew that it was not like a chance because Lamar had definitely his worst numbers, and he had thrown, like last year, he finished the year with 16 passing touchdowns, 13 interceptions, right? Not good numbers. But we were talking about it if you were looking at a true MVP early on in the season, because the interceptions happened later on too. Keep that in mind. But early on in the year, he was putting up fantastic numbers in terms of yards. He was one of the highest player in yards, and he was legitimately carrying the Ravens, who were in the number 1 spot. So he was a guy that was getting already disrespected last year. And now going into this year, he's in a prime spot to be a comeback player potentially.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about last season and the numbers, they don't look amazing for him. But watching the Ravens, it was so clear that he had made a jump in his game. The way that he was throwing the ball, the way that he was commanding the offense, it was much improved from the previous years. And he won, the MVP 2 years prior to last season. And he was able to show that he could lead a team. And it wasn't, the defense was playing really well. Because in 2019, he led the team. Don't get me wrong. But a lot of the defense was making a lot of plays. We were getting Marcus Peters pick 6s in back-to-back weeks, I believe. Marlon Humphrey forced 7 or 9 fumbles. It was unbelievable. It just kept going. Everybody was working in full cylinder. It was working. The offense was working. He deserved that MVP. But last year, nothing was working. Not a single thing was working except for Lamar Jackson. And he would go out there. And Matt, we talk about this all the time. There are very few quarterbacks where you can be in a situation, maybe it's halftime or maybe it's the third quarter, and you say, hey, we need to score every possession to end this game to have a chance to win. And you give the ball to Lamar Jackson, and every possession you're going to score. That's what happened against the Indianapolis Colts. They were getting the brakes beat off of them, and Lamar Jackson just said, hey, I'm just going to start dotting everybody up. And I'm going to throw for 400 yards or whatever he ended up with. And I'm going to throw all these touchdowns to Mark Andrews and Hollywood, and we're going to win this football game. He put the team on his back like nobody else, honestly, in recent memory, in the NFL. Obviously, there's been great MVP seasons. Cam Newton, Patrick Mahomes. Last year, we had Aaron Rodgers. 2 years ago, Aaron Rodgers. There's been some great MVP seasons. But there hasn't been a player that every single week has been asked to do literally everything. He was the only player that could rush the ball. He was the only player that could throw the ball, and he didn't have pass catchers outside of Mark Andrews that could consistently catch the football. And he was still the number 1 seed. Like,
I was going to say the 3 games too. You're bringing up that, you score every single time. I can think of 3 off the top of my head. The Colts, the Raiders, and the Chiefs, where he literally had to do that. And then he did that. And I think all 3 of those games were on like nationally broadcasted games, like Monday night or Sunday night football. And that was early. Like, keep in mind, he only played 12 games. That's a quarter of his performances. And that's the ones I can just remember because they were such amazing performances.
Yeah. I mean, even think back to 2 years ago, Monday Night Football against the Cleveland Browns. Just goes out there. They had lost the lead because he had cramps or he had to go to the bathroom. We don't know exactly what. Comes back out. He's lost the lead, and he was like, all right, sorry, Baker. I know you got back into this game, but I'm going to score the ball every time, and we're going to win. Like,
dude, and like also like look, just like talking about him as a player, a lot of like the narratives were that like, oh, he didn't develop as a passer. He was worse as a passer since he was throwing more interceptions. But if you look at his actual numbers, he was very easily on pace to break any, like completely shatter any passing yards numbers he had before, because he had 3,100 in the MVP year and he already had 2,800 something. So he was going to put up a ton of passing yards. Now, his completion percentage was about the same as the year before, 64%, but that's solid. He's been at 64 to 66 for the past 3 seasons since his rookie year. So those are pretty good numbers there. We know.
I want to say, take out the Hollywood Brown drops. He's throwing 90% completion percentage right there.
How many in that in the Tucker game, the one against the Lions? Oh my God, it was like 3 touchdowns that he dropped. He would have beat his yards record if Hollywood would have caught those passes.
Probably. I mean, and then when you look at him this year and coming back, and maybe it's a contract year. We don't know if he gets that extension done before the season starts, but the weapons that he has now are easily the best he's ever had in his career. He won the MVP with Hollywood, Willie Snead, and Seth Roberts. Those were his pass catchers. And he did have Mark Andrews and Nick Boyle. And Hayden Hurst was I think the 5th leading pass catcher on that team. This year, the roster that he has, the guys he's throwing to, they have good hands and they can get open. And they can make plays in space. None of the players from that 2019 year could get open outside of Mark Andrews. They couldn't catch. And with the ball in the hands, they weren't very good.
Hollywood came in 2020, right?
He was 2019.
Okay, but he was a rookie. He was not quite.
Yeah, he was coming off the list, Frank.
Yeah. No, in this offense, I mean, like this year, like even though, and also that's another thing is like, I think a lot of people just don't think that the Ravens have like the receiving core to be able to do that, like to be able to hang with Lamar. I think that's kind of like a misconception going around the league right now. But if you look at the receiving core this year, it's better than what he's had to work with. Like really obviously, if you go back and you start comparing it to other teams, if you look at the offensive line, now not the offensive line when he was younger, maybe not quite there yet, but compared to last season, massive upgrades. And then you go to the run game, probably, I'm not gonna say it's better. I think probably the first the first couple years maybe, but like he has way better receiving core. It's like pretty much
JK is better than Mark Ingram.
Yeah.
And Mark Ingram was 2019. It was Mark Ingram and Gus Edwards, and now it's JK and Gus.
Yeah. And no, you guys had Seth Roberts. Yeah, you guys had Willie Snead. Come on, bro. Willie Snead, really? Willie Snead in what, 2020? That's ridiculous.
Oh, and I want to say this just because I think it was really funny. We had a comment on TTV that said, I can't believe we signed DeMarcus Robinson. I'd much rather have Willie Snead.
No, you wouldn't. You definitely would not want that. You don't want Willie Snead. Willie Snead can't move. That's a problem. But yeah. I'm just interested in it. I wanted to see it in terms of his rushing numbers. How different were they? I want to see right now. I mean, not quite on the same level as previous seasons, but pretty much the same thing. Just not as many touchdowns. That's just because the offense wasn't that good. And he didn't have running backs to run any type of zone options or read options or anything like that when they got in the red zone. I remember who was the running back at the beginning of the year? I had him on my fantasy team.
Last year?
Yeah,
well, there was a lot.
We were
it
hyped
was
about him.
Tyshawn Williams,
Tyshawn
Nate
Williams.
McCrary.
I remember when he kept fumbling him? When Tyshawn Williams kept fumbling
he kept
the zone reads and
fumbling.
they couldn't run it? Dude, come on, man. He didn't have anything to work with. But no, I'm pumped for Lamar because I feel like for the Ravens too, I think that their division's a little bit overrated. I do think that the North is. I think it's worse than you think it is. I don't think that any of the teams are bad, but Watson's gone for 11 games. So that's unless they go and sign a quarterback, come on. Like they're not going to be very good. Jacoby Brissett's going to be their quarterback. That's not ideal. Let's just put it that way.
Oh no, Josh Dobbs looked filthy in the preseason.
We know who Josh Dobbs is at this point. We know who Josh Dobbs is. You got Mitchell for the Steelers, and they got some great weapons. Pickens is getting a ton of hype. We saw Najee. We've seen Deontay emerge. We've seen all these guys emerge on the offense. I don't like Mitchell Trubisky at all. I think Kenny Pickett might start, but Kenny Pickett's also not that great either. So that's the other thing. And then you have a legit team in the Bengals. And also, I don't want to rip the Steelers too much because the Steelers defense is phenomenal. Like that's very clear. But then the Bengals defense is getting a little bit overrated, and they kind of got a nice run. But let's not go back and act like they were the second best team in the NFL because they were very obviously not. And if you don't have injuries last season, they're not the best team in the division, clearly. So
and they barely won the division. There was a 2-game difference between the Bengals and the Ravens last year. And the Ravens lost every game without Lamar Jackson. And the Bengals would not have made the playoffs as a wild card team. Ravens have Lamar Jackson, the Bengals don't make the playoffs, like very clearly. And I just think it's really funny that Bengals fans are like, oh no, we're so good. And it's like, okay. But you wouldn't have even been there if we hadn't had our quarterback get injured. And also you got the most favorable postseason schedule I've ever seen in terms of matchups. Like get to start off against, did they play the Raiders, then the Titans? I think it was like, no. They played the Raiders in the wild card round, and then they played the Titans because they had the first round bye.
Tannehill threw 4 picks.
It was horrible.
He was horrible. He couldn't hit.
And it was Derrick Henry's first game returning from a Jones fracture.
Yep.
And then they get the Chiefs, and it was like, okay, but the Chiefs are that is a bad matchup for the Chiefs. I mean, the Bengals are good. I'm not trying to take anything away. Like they're good, but the matchups that they had were perfect for them. They get to play teams without, good pass rush. And their whole weakness was the offensive line. Then they get to the Super Bowl, and Aaron Donald in the second half just goes like, yeah, I feel like we're going to win this game. And basically ends that entire hope for Joe Burrow. But, let's talk about the Ravens team as a whole, because last year, obviously, last year was just so rough, losing so many players. And Miguel, we will get to Isaiah Likely. We got a lot to say about that, man. But overall, last year, losing your number 1 corner or your number 2 corner before the season starts in Marcus Peters. The same day you lose Gus Edwards. And I believe it was the same week they lost J.K. Dobbins. And then the next week they lose Justice Hill. Then they start the season, and they start the season. In week 1, Ronnie Stanley gets injured. You're like, oh, okay. So there goes our left tackle. There goes our entire running back core. There goes our number 2 corner. Lamar gets hurt in the season. Marlon Humphrey gets hurt in the season. And it just became an absolute, Hollywood's hurt every other week. Bateman got hurt in training camp. So he didn't play till like week 7 against the Chargers was his debut. And it was just unbelievably ruthless what happened to the Baltimore Ravens. And now everyone is coming back. J.K. Dobbins looks like he's going to be ready for week 1. We don't know about Gus Edwards. Marcus Peters has returned to practice. He's been activated off the PUP list. Lamar's back. This is a different team than what we saw last year. And for some reason, even though I think the roster may be better than it was in 2020 and 2019, people look at it like, the Ravens aren't that good. They haven't done anything recently. Well, yeah, they haven't done anything recently. Everybody on that team was hurt. I feel like when When Aaron Rodgers misses the whole year, they come back the next year and they're like, Packers going to win that division. Best team, like Aaron Rodgers, Super Bowl contender right there. Why? Because it's Aaron Rodgers. Lamar Jackson misses the second half of last year, and everyone just starts going, I mean, like I saw Colin Cowherd, who claims he's a Lamar Jackson, like, oh, I've always been high on Lamar. And then you're watching him, and he's like, I mean, I would rather have like Derek Carr. And you're like, what? What are you talking about? And I like Derek Carr. And he's like, I mean, when I look at it, like Justin Herbert just, he can just do so much more for your team. And, he's a winner. And you're like, so where's his playoff appearance if he's a winner? Like, what is this? Oh, Kyler Murray's just a winner right there. Where does that narrative come from? Everyone just pushes narratives on random people to make them seem better than Lamar Jackson. And then anytime Lamar Jackson disproves the narrative, they're like, that narrative doesn't count. We've got a new narrative. It's no longer that he can't throw the deep ball. Now it's, he can't win a playoff game. And then he wins a playoff game. And they're like, that was never a problem. He can't come from behind. Comes from behind like 3 times last year, double digits. And they're like, that was never a problem. Come on. What he can't do is he can't throw for 800 passing yards and rush for 37 touchdowns in a single game. Like, he just can't do that. I mean, I just don't want a player that can't do that. And he can't stay healthy, even though he's only missed. Like, that was the narrative that came out Sunday Night Football last night. Guy comes out and he's like, Lamar Jackson, if he could just figure out how to stay healthy. Kyler Murray is standing on the opposite sideline. Kyler Murray's problem is, man, he keeps missing games at the end of the year. Lamar Jackson missed 5 games, and it was all from one injury last season. That's it. Matt, how's the comeback looking for this year? The bounce back season for the Ravens?
Dude, I love the Ravens, and I wanted to see, just the first thing I wanted to look at was what are their odds to win the division. And they are the favorite. They are the favorite to win the North, but they're at plus 145. Last season, I just said this earlier. I need to emphasize how big of a deal this is. They were the number 1 seed until Lamar got hurt. You just brought up all of those injuries, and then we look at the team. Like, if I'm looking at the depth chart right now, you didn't have either of your corners because Marlon ended up going down. Calais Campbell went down too, and he was having a fantastic year. And then that was like the final one where it's like, dude, there's no one. There's literally no one left. And then Bateman eventually came back, and I guess Andrews was there. But dude, it was just injury after injury after injury. And now I'm looking at this team and the talent on this Ravens team, especially defensively, especially in like certain positions such as running back. Now you have JK, you have Gus coming back, but you also have, Mike Davis. Justice Hill is your like 4th, 5th string guy. Like, you're so much deeper there, where the Ravens' real problem that they had was that they weren't as effective running the football, and Greg Roman kind of got exposed because they could not run the football. Well, one, they have all their running backs back. They have Lamar back, right? They also, the offensive line is drastically improved. Is Ronnie Stanley going to start week 1?
That's the hope. There hasn't been any reported setbacks, but I'm thinking he'll start week 1. But
Okay.
He may start like week 2 or week 3.
Okay, but he's going to be there early. You got Morgan Moses. Jawan James. Is Jawan James likely going to be the swing tackle? So he would then start the year, right?
Potentially. It could be him, or it could be Daniel Falele, who's a 6'8", 340-pound dude out of Minnesota.
Oh, he's more of a project, though. They probably wouldn't. I doubt that he would start at least early in the year. But still, if that's like your 4th tackle and you're keeping extra tackle and he's kind of like inside depth.
They're likely going to keep 10 offensive linemen. That's the expectation. Wow. Is they will have a backup for every single position. And Patrick Makari, who plays every offensive line position, is actually really good at tackle.
And he's your backup center too.
And he's your backup center. He can also play really good left guard, right guard, left. He's played every single position on the offensive line for the Ravens and played well. Yeah,
so that's great. I mean, and you look at the squad. We're going to talk more about the tight end position later, but you're going to run a 2 tight end set. So you're going to have Rashad Bateman, who's a legit wideout. I don't think people have really realized how good of a player he is. He was awesome at Minnesota. He was fantastic. So you have him. And then you're going to have either Duvernay or James Prochet or, DeMarcus Robinson or one of these fast guys on the other outside that's kind of just in the Greg Roman offense. He will consistently run clear out routes every single time. This fantastic idea. But okay, I won't get into too much into Greg Roman. But I don't know. It's very exciting when you look at who they're rolling out this year. Defensively, I do have a couple question marks. I don't really know what Peters is going to look like. They did definitely help the secondary, but you add Marcus Williams. Now that's a big thing, is because, like, all right, at least you're adding a guy like that. Patrick Queen, we'll see how he looks. He's had an up and down career, I'd say, to this point, but I felt like he was coming on at the end of last season. So let's see what he does. Takes some players a little bit to kind of get going to adjust the speed of the NFL. So maybe he's just a little bit of a late bloomer there, but
he's also one of the youngest players on the Ravens roster.
He's like,
I believe he's 23 years old or 24 years old, and he's in his third season. He's younger than Odafe Away.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. But yeah, dude, I mean, I look at the Ravens team and they just look really good. Like, this is a playoff team very clearly. The big thing is just health. But like you said, like, now you can look in and you can say, okay, some of these guys are getting a little bit older, but like, it's kind of hard to look at the season and go, all right, well, we're going to have everyone get hurt. You're probably not going to have that again. That was the same kind of deal that happened to the Niners in 2020. They come back from the Super Bowl. Everyone gets hurt. Literally everyone, your quarterback too. And guess what? They missed the playoffs. Next year they come back and then they go to the NFC Championship game with a pretty similar squad to what they had pre-injury. So like, it feels like very reminiscent of that. I'm trying to think, who was the other team in the league that had all the injuries last year?
It was the Titans, but they kept their quarterback.
So it was a little
they
bit
lost Derrick Henry. You know, they didn't have Julio. They had a lot of defensive injuries, but they still had their quarterback.
Yeah.
And AJ Brown.
And the Colts were kind of banged up early on in the year, but only at like some positions. But yeah, I mean, no one had injuries as bad as the Ravens. It was absurd how many injuries they had. So like you were saying, it's just a completely different squad. It's a playoff squad. You look at the team, you look at the talent, you look at what they've done to win in the past, run the football. And they're going to be able to run the football so much better than they were last season. And you also got, you got some sweet weapons that I think that people are going to get excited about as they see them, just because they're inexperienced. I haven't really seen Bateman on the field. Definitely haven't seen Likely on NFL regular season field. So like, you have other guys that are going to be legit playmakers for Lamar. And JK's back, which is big.
Yeah, I mean, J.K. Dobbins was the best rookie running back in the NFL, and I firmly believe that. I think he was better than Jonathan Taylor his rookie year. He came out, he averaged 6 yards per carry, led the NFL. He rushed for over 700 yards, and he really wasn't playing until the second half of the season. Like, he really came in and was like, this guy is our running back of the future. I had said after that year, I was like, I don't want to extend Gus Edwards because it doesn't make any sense, because J.K. Dobbins is that good to the point where we can say, hey, we can get an undrafted guy, like we got Gus Edwards as an undrafted player, to be the running back too and be that committee. But we ended up keeping Gus Edwards. So like, that running back duo right there is the best Lamar Jackson has ever had, and he's going to be able to run the football again. The Ravens went out and they drafted what many people have said, was the best center prospect in the last 10 years in Tyler Linderbaum, which center has been a problem that they've had. Kevin Zeitler was very solid last year. They bring in a right tackle. Like, the offensive line is so much better. Mark Andrews initially came out of Oklahoma, and it was like, okay, this is a pass catcher. This is a wide receiver playing tight end, right? That was the type of thing that he was compared to. It was not a blocker. Mark Andrews has become a top 5 blocking tight end as a starter in the NFL, because a lot of teams have, like, the guy that's technically an offensive tackle, but they're like, no, he's a tight end, and we just throw him out there. But Mark Andrews goes out there and he blocks people now, which is like, last year I was not expecting it, and I'm watching him and I'm like, when did Nick Boyle start wearing 89? Because Mark Andrews is like pancaking people, and there were many plays where, like, one-on-one against Trey Hendrickson, and he's just keeping him up, and he's just beating him in a one-on-one. And you're like, what? that shouldn't be happening with Mark Andrews. That's not his skill set. That's something you expect out of a Nick Boyle, a George Kittle, a true blocker. Then Mark Andrews all of a sudden was just like, yeah, I'm just going to work on that, and I'm going to get really good at it. So they've got a good blocking tight end. Demarcus Robinson, this is something I didn't know when we signed him. One of the highest graded run blocking wide receivers in the NFL.
Dude, I would have never guessed.
I would have never known that.
He's tiny.
And it's just like, they're like, oh yeah, super physical, and just goes out there and just mauls people. And it's like, what? So not only is he a big play threat, but if the Ravens run the ball with him on the field, he may start George Pickensing people. and just start throwing him on the ground and blocking for him. So overall, like this team is now built around Greg Roman's system, and it's going to, you know what? I hate Greg Roman's system, but it's built around the system. Last year, it and the system were in completely different trajectories, and they tried to merge, and it worked horribly. And the Ravens just couldn't succeed. But then Lamar Jackson was just like, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to pull a rabbit out of my hat every single week and give us at least a shot at winning this football game. So, but overall, like the Ravens roster right now is, I mean, I've said this plenty of times. I think they're clearly a top 3 roster in the AFC. I think they're a clearly top 3 team in the AFC. They have a top 3 quarterback in the AFC. They probably have a top 3 defense in the AFC if things go as projected. But still, when you hear the national media talk about them, they're like, I don't even know if they're going to make the playoffs right now. Maybe a wild card. And it's like, this team went 8-3 with Lamar. Bounceback is just getting Lamar for 5 more games. What's Lamar's career win percentage? Oh, yeah, one of the highest ever. That's probably, he wins over 60% of his games, which would be 3 out of 5. Oh, wow, look at that. That's an 11-win team. Bengals don't make the playoffs. And look at that. Ravens get to play the Raiders in the first round in a revenge game, but instead of, going up against them with nobody, they at least have experienced running backs, which they eventually got. But no, that's not how it worked. Instead, it was, it's Tyler Huntley. And everyone was like, Tyler Huntley is so good. Look at the way he's leading this team, the way he loses every game. That's the difference between Tyler Huntley and Lamar. Tyler Huntley lost every game that he played last year after Lamar Jackson got hurt. Now, we did win a game. I believe it was against the Bears or the Vikings. I think it was against the Bears. But that was in the middle of the season, and that was the Bears. like, if you don't win that game, there's something to be said. But it was like, game comes down to the wire. Tyler Huntley, can he do it? Oh, no, he cannot. How many quarterbacks in the NFL are you taking over Lamar Jackson in a can he do it situation? Maybe 2 or 3 or 4?
Not many, that's for sure.
Like there's very few. Like, Mahomes, maybe Allen, Rodgers, Russell Wilson, and Brady. I think those are the only ones that I would be like, okay, if you said that, I would take them over him. But I see people that they're like, nah, man, I'm taking Justin Herbert. And I'm like, okay, if Justin Herbert's on. If Justin Herbert's off, he's throwing a pick 6 in this must-win situation. That's how it works out. So the Ravens it's not even I don't even know if you can call it a bounce back. It's just like, hey, we're still here and we're still the team to beat. Because when Lamar got hurt, it was like everyone's looking at them and they're like, this is the best team in the AFC. But then he gets hurt and they're like, nah, that team sucked. It's like, yeah, the roster sucked. The games didn't look pretty at all. Lamar Jackson just carried them. And now he actually has people around him. So definitely a bounce back candidate. Let's get into the next bounce back team. Don't worry, we will get into Isaiah Likely in a few minutes, but we wanted to talk about the Saints first. I don't think we have. Oh, look at that. We do have a Saints one as well. But don't worry, guys. We will be talking about Isaiah Likely in, 10, 15 minutes. So stay tuned for that. But, if you're watching right now on TTV and you guys wouldn't mind going to check out AFS. Matt and I, we stream every single Monday. I stream every single Wednesday night, and we put out all of those clips. And, we're trying to get to 100 subs tonight. We are at 85 to start the night. So we'll see what we end up with, but we'd really appreciate it if you guys went over there, if you just like overall sports content. But
yeah, lots of NFL and NCAA football too. College ball, lots of stuff like that.
Yeah. So in terms of other bounce back teams, there was really only one that we could really think of. And it was like, okay, because bounce back they're typically good and they're seen as a good team, as like a playoff team. But last year, for some reason, they didn't make the playoffs. The only other team that we really noticed where it was like, okay, yeah, they should be back in the playoffs or have a good chance of being back in the playoffs was the New Orleans Saints. And I want to start off talking about this because the New Orleans Saints are led by none other than my favorite player in the NFL currently. All right. I call him the crab leg king. Some people call him many other names. Some call him the pick maestro. He's got a lot of nicknames. But Jameis Winston, the workout god, whatever you want to call him. Jameis Winston is leading this team, and Jameis Winston last year looked like a much improved player. Because he left Tampa Bay and he coming off the 30-30 season, and he goes under Sean Payton and Drew Brees. Well, he kind of has to sit behind that quarterback guru and one of the smartest quarterbacks in the history of the game. And it looked like last year he learned. Now, did he throw a couple of bad interceptions? Yes. But he also had a lot of games where you were like, did he really make any just boneheaded mistakes? Because he used to be, he makes a boneheaded throw every quarter. And it was like, yeah, maybe he just won a game, which is a heck of a lot better because now he has Michael Thomas. So he's not working with the worst wide receiver core I've ever seen out of a team in the history of football because it was so atrocious. Like people talk about, oh, Lamar Jackson doesn't have weapons. Jameis Winston last year had no weapons. He was walking out with Lil Jordan Humphrey, Marquez Callaway. You can say Taysom Hill at tight end. It was horrible.
You could say, in comparison to the rest of the league, his best skill player was his rookie tight end, Trouton. And the wide receiving core was the worst in the league.
Oh, yeah.
If not the worst, bottom 3 for sure, right? So, dude, it's like night and day. And MT's supposed to be healthy by week 1. He's supposed to be back. If he's there, that's obviously a massive difference. They basically said that in practice so far during training camp. He's looked like the exact same guy, which is something that you should be, if you're a Saints fan, going into training camp, you should have been concerned about that because we don't know what he's going to look like. He hasn't played in 2 years. But last time he played, granted, he had Drew Brees as a quarterback. They had a great chemistry, a lot of great chemistry, but he was a consistent top 3 wide receiver in terms of numbers. That's ridiculous. So they were that good. Also adding Olave, who is a sick player, a healthy Alvin Kamara. They have Mark Ingram back. And I know Mark Ingram's not the same guy at all, but there is something special about having both Kamara and Ingram in the backfield. Even when they were back together last year, you could feel it. It was a lot better.
Ingram's a great locker room presence. That dude is one of the best hype men. That is going to get the locker room going. He was one of the biggest reasons for Lamar Jackson's MVP year. The way that he just came in and he came up with the whole big trust thing. He was just free. It was amazing to watch. And Mark Ingram on the sideline hyping everybody up. Meet me outside the bank, come see me, all of that stuff. Now he's bringing that to Jameis Winston, Mr. Eat a W himself, not the greatest of hype men. Now you get yourself Mark Ingram, a great hype man.
Yeah, so I think for the Saints team, when I'm looking at it, in terms of the locker room stuff, you're right there, because there's a great guy to have. But also, the big loss is that they lost Teron Armstead, but then they drafted Trevor Penning in the first round. So that is a big deal. You were changing your left tackle. You're going from a very great left tackle to someone that's a question mark. He's a rookie. I know he's really good, or he's supposed to be really good, but he's still a rookie. He's a rookie tackle. It's a large difference going in the NFL, changing the speeds and stuff like that. So they also lost a little bit in their secondary, but you look at it, they have Marcus May. Now, Marcus May is a prime bounce-back candidate in terms of coming back from his Achilles injury. If he's the same guy, he was sweet when he was on the Jets. He was a really, really good player. He was underrated. They also bring in Tyrann Mathieu. Now, he's not the same guy that he used to be. But I remember early on in the offseason, people were telling me he was going to get $30 million deal or something ridiculous. He did not end up getting that. But he's a solid addition to kind of band-aid their loss of Marcus Williams. So corners, CJ Gardner-Johnson, he was sweet last year. Marshawn Lattimore, enough said there. And then the other corner that's starting is Paulson Adebo, who I know that you like a lot. They already have one of the better front sevens in the league. Their defense is legit. Also, let's add this in. The NFC is not good. The NFC is very, very clearly the weaker of the two conferences. So if the O-line is pretty solid for Jameis, and Jameis doesn't force the ball as much as he used to, even if he does force the ball a little bit, he has sweet receivers now. They're going to be really good. They should 100% at least make a wild card team. And if the Bucs aren't good, because I don't know if you've been paying attention to what's been happening with the Bucs, but the Bucs' entire interior offensive line is just gone. They've had, I think, one dude retired, and then I think they've had 3 guys that have had season-ending injuries, I believe. 3 guys already. So they're in a bad spot in terms of the interior, but like their defense is still really good. I don't know, dude. I'm pumped. I think Chris Olave is probably going to be, in terms of numbers wise, the best rookie receiver, just because he's a perfect scheme fit to put with Jameis. And so if Alvin Kamara is still healthy, because Alvin Kamara didn't look that great last year, but he was hurt and it was not a good it was not a good offense and like a lot of weird stuff. If he can be what he looked like not last year but the year before, they're gonna be sweet. So big question mark at left tackle. And outside of that, there's really not that many question marks for this team in a weak conference where they have the Falcons and the Panthers in their division and should probably destroy those offenses.
Not only do they get to play the Falcons and the Panthers twice, they also play against the Seattle Seahawks. That is just another very, very easy victory. Like if you lose to the Seattle Seahawks, it's rough. And that's something to keep in mind. Now, they unfortunately play Cleveland at the end of the year, so that they don't get to squeak out one at the end of the year. But overall, like Chris Olave, I think is one of the most slept on draft picks in this draft, because what is Jameis known for? What was he drafted for? A cannon of an arm. He loves to throw the deep ball. Chris Olave made a living getting behind the defense and making big catches at Ohio State. I'm sorry, the Ohio State. Then they have Michael Thomas, who is one of the best. I would say he is the best short, maybe even the best intermediate route runner in the NFL. I think like Devontae Adams is the best overall, but Michael Thomas is just filthy on in routes, out routes, slant routes. And I know everyone makes fun of the slant routes. And they're like, oh, he only runs slants. You know what? Michael Thomas may be the greatest slant route runner in the history of the NFL. The dude got 1,700 yards. He broke Marvin Harrison's reception record because nobody could cover him. Like everyone's like, oh, all he does is this. Yeah. Well, it's like running the same Madden play over and over again.
But you know why MT gets so much crap. It's because MT talks so much and people just clown him and he gets like bothered and stuff by it. Like that's why. Yeah. Like, but I'm not saying I completely agree, but that's definitely the reason why everyone wants to clown MT. I did want to add one more thing. So I looked at, because we're talking about Jameis, he likes to push the ball downfield, right?
Yeah.
Last year, do you know how much his interception rate declined from his 30-30 season?
I would guess it was down to like 2%.
It was the first season that he's ever had it under 2%. It was 1.9%.
Look at that.
In 2019, it was 4.8%. That is the highest number I've ever seen.
Like that shows you that, one, there was growth. And what's crazy about that number is none of the players he threw to were open, because none of them could create separation. Like, I mean, he was going out there and it was just like Jameis is known for like fitting it into a tight window. There was no, oh man, Jameis should have thrown it over there. It was like, no, Jameis made the best possible throw he could. Did it work out? Maybe not. But you know what? It was the best option he had.
And if they wouldn't have got hurt, they would have definitely made the playoffs. We're talking about that with the Ravens and Lamar, but they were very clearly going to make a wild card. So that's
with
another
Marquez Callaway and Lil Jordan Humphrey. Like that was, I mean, Lil Jordan Humphrey, I'm pretty sure is like 6'4", which is hilarious to me. But now all of a sudden you replace those two players, and I believe they still have Marquez Callaway on the roster, but Chris Olave is a much better player than Marquez Callaway. And Michael Thomas, there is a chance Michael Thomas comes back and he's just a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL still. Like, I think he's probably, like, I put him still top 10. I put him right around 10 right now because we just haven't seen him. But I mean, that dude he's got great hands and he gets open. And people make fun of him for having great hands and getting open. You know who doesn't get open? All of the receivers on that roster last year, and yet they were still winning games. Jameis Winston was just going out there and it was like, all right, I got to drop this into a bucket from 55 yards out, and we'll see if he catches it. And it's like, oh, no, he didn't catch it.
I do think, though, to be fair, I think their defense did get a little bit worse.
Yeah.
And obviously the offensive line got worse losing Teron Armstead, but like it's like so different in the terms of weapons that they are not even comparable because of how like, and especially in today's NFL too, where like you look at like a lot of the really good teams, what do they have in common? They have sweet wideouts, they have a sweet quarterback, they have a good passing game, good running game, and they're very offensive oriented most of the time. The Saints were not, bro. The Saints were like the least explosive team because that's the whole thing is like usually the Saints, even with Drew Brees, like new alarm Drew Brees, would still be explosive because Kamara would take a bunch, MT would take a slam, right? They have guys over the top. They had, Emmanuel Sanders there for a while. Like they had so many different guys. They were like, dude, because I would watch because I had Alvin Kamara in fantasy.
It was horrible.
It was not fun to watch.
It was avoid the Saints game. That was
don't want
the
to watch
whole
it. It'd be the most boring game of the weekend every time.
I'm like, I try and watch Jameis Winston whenever he's on TV. And like watching him with the Saints, I was like, what are they doing? Because it was like Jameis Winston, everyone is covered, throws a strike, 3-yard gain, Adam Troutman. And Ace, I think that could very well happen. I do like that prediction. Like, I mean, he's just going to go out there and it's like, yeah, will Jameis lose you a couple of games this season? Potentially. But also, he can win you a lot of games. And yeah, the LASIK surgery is real. All right. The 20/20 vision, it's no longer 30/30 vision. Now it's 20/20 vision. All right. Like overall, this team is much improved, and they are going to go out there and they're going to play very well. But let's get into the next topic because I know this is one that I am so excited to talk about. Matt and I switched the at the same time. But let's talk about it. The underrated rookies in the NFL. We're going to start off with a Baltimore Raven right here because this dude, Mr. Isaiah Likely, is the best player I've ever seen from the Ravens throughout their rookie training camp and throughout the preseason. He has come out in every single report that has come out about Isaiah Likely in the preseason has just been like, this guy is just making plays. He's making catches. He is learning. He's sitting there and he's just talking to Mark Andrews and just trying to learn as much as possible as he can from Mark Andrews. And then you watch Ravens Wired and it's just him standing next to Mark Andrews. Like, okay, so when I'm running this route, all right, when do you decide to break? Like, how do you know when you're trying to do that? And Mark Andrews just like helping him out. And they started calling him Baby Mark. And it was like, okay, we're seeing this Isaiah Likely. We're hearing about it. But he's going against Patrick Queen in coverage. Just saying, not the best linebacker when it comes to coverage. Comes out in the first preseason game and looks pretty solid. He gets 2 receptions, I believe. One of them, he mossed a linebacker just completely. Linebacker got his entire arm inside of the ball and Likely, and he just completely grapples the arm down with him and gets the reception. And it was like, okay, we saw some stuff out of Isaiah Likely. He also juked a guy out of his shoes in that first game. And then last night, week 2 of the preseason. That may have been the best preseason performance I've ever seen. Like, he just went out there and was just like, I'm going to win us this football game. Like, because I'm not a huge fan of Tyler Huntley. He's extremely conservative. He made Tyler Huntley look so good with his numbers. They were like, oh, Tyler Huntley, throwing all these completions, getting all these yards. It was like Isaiah Likely catching the ball and just making everybody miss and getting excessive yards. It was so crazy to watch. 8 receptions, 100 yards, and a touchdown. I texted Matt when he had 7 receptions for 92 yards. And I was like, dude, this Isaiah Likely guy, absolute monster. Put the stat line in. And I go, he's just unbelievable. About 10 seconds later, I text him. I go, scratch that. 8 receptions, 100 yards, 1 touchdown. Matt, I know you've seen some stuff on Isaiah Likely. What are your thoughts on this dude?
So I'm always a little bit skeptical because, like, all right, you're going to see a guy, McConnell's hyping him up to me. Oh, like, this guy, this and that. And
I was saying that like week 1 of training. I was like,
yeah, he was going to
Likely guy, draft him in fantasy.
Yeah, I'm like, all right, dude, you already have Andrews there. Like, come on, let's calm down a little bit. But you start kind of looking at it and you're like, okay, wait a second. It makes a little bit of sense. They're probably going to run a lot of 2 tight end sets. And he's competing with Nick Boyle for that spot. So he could, I'm thinking, yeah, he could actually be an impact player. He could definitely be an impact player. I could see it working out. I could see him, being the second tight end behind Mark Andrews. But then you go and you watch the preseason game and you're like, dude, this guy is going insane. Like, I get it's preseason. I get that it doesn't matter. That's not really the point of like looking at his stats and stuff. Go watch it. He's throwing guys on the ground routinely. Greg Olsen was an announcer. You brought this up. He's sitting in like the soft spots in the zone. Like there was one where I want to say they were in a cover 3, and he just sat right in the middle of the field. And I believe it was third down. I think it was third down. Picks up the yards, and I think he threw someone on the ground and picked up like 5 more yards. Every single play, there's like 3 guys missing tackles on him because he's stiff arming them or he's shedding their tackles or whatever it is, right? And they're just not able to get clean hits on him. He's extremely quick. He's extremely athletic. And then, wait a second. That's right. The Baltimore Ravens are the team that literally develop tight ends probably better than anyone outside maybe the Patriots. Like those are the 2 teams where it's like they just consistently do this every single time. They come in and then they're great. He's a 4th round tight end. The thing about tight end, and we were talking about this earlier, very few like the best tight ends are drafted in the 1st round. Like it's usually George Kittle 5th round, Mark Andrews 3rd round, Gronk 2nd, Kelsey was 2nd I think too, right? 2nd or 3rd. Like all these guys are non-first rounders. So would it be super weird if Isaiah Likely was just a complete monster? No, not really. He's kind of in the perfect spot to do that. He's also, like I said, he's going to be behind Mark Andrews. That's still going to be the case. No matter how good he is, he's probably going to be behind Mark Andrews for this entire season. He is going to get the worst linebacker when they man up on him. And if you watched last night, I don't know who he was going against. I don't remember the team that I was just watching the Likely stuff. He was smoking those guys. And you've legitimately been telling me about him since the beginning of training camp. So, dude, I am pumped. I drafted him in a couple dynasty fantasy leagues. I'm like, I feel set. Like, I'm like, oh yeah, like I'm sold on him. And I usually feel like I'm very like, all right, let's see how it does. Let's see how it looks. Dude, he looked like a stud. He looked like he was imposing his will physically on the defense every single time. In terms of just like, all right, I'm going to hit with a little stutter step and I'm going to run an inside route. Or I'm going to do this, sit, and then I'm going to pop up. Or then in the end zone, he goes and he gets tackled like 5 yards before. And then it takes 4 guys to start tackling him. And then he rolls into the end zone. It's like, okay, that was another great play. Like just every component, the yak component, the sitting in the zone component. I don't know how he is as a blocker, but we already talked about it. If you're running a lot of 2 tight end sets, you can probably stand him out wide, use him more like a big slot. But dude, he was great. And also if you go back to his final year at Coastal Carolina, and I know that that's a small school, but they've been really good for the past few years. He had a great season. He had 12 touchdowns and over 900 yards. So it makes a lot of sense if all of a sudden we look up and we go, damn, Isaiah Likely is a legit tight end. He is one of the better tight ends in the league. I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Yeah, and I think he's going to get overshadowed by Mark Andrews, obviously, because Mark Andrews is so good. But Isaiah Likely is a playmaker. Like, he is someone that it's very rare, especially at the tight end position, where you're watching a game and you're like, I want to watch this guy play football more. Like, it's super rare. Like, no disrespect to Mike Gesicki. I think he's a really solid tight end in the NFL. I do not watch him and go, I need to watch more Mike Gesicki highlights. I don't watch Dallas Goedert and say, give me some more of that Goddard. I don't say that. All right? I say, give me more Kelsey. I say, give me more Kittle. I say, give me more Andrews. Give me Kyle Pitts. And give me Darren Waller. Sorry, Dawson Knox. I'm sorry, Pat Freiermuth. None of you are entertaining to watch. Because you're big and you kind of just sit in that, you maybe are getting good at finding that soft spot in the zone. Isaiah Likely is coming in as a 4th round player at the tight end spot. And for wide receivers, which wide receivers are there's multiple wide receivers always drafted in the 1st round, much more prominent than the tight end spot. You watch them and it's like maybe one every year. Maybe one comes in and you're like, this guy's kind of got that veteran savvy route running. Like Jamar Chase came in last year and you're watching him and you're like, this guy knows what he's doing. The way he's fading inside to get the defender to step a little bit away so he can take that extra step outside to catch that back shoulder fade. Like those are the types of things where you're watching it and you're like, this guy knows what he's doing. This guy's going to be really good. You don't see that from a tight end. The way that he just came out was just like, yeah, I know where every soft spot in the zone is going to be, and I'm going to be open in every 3rd down situation, and I'm going to catch the ball with soft hands. You don't see that out of rookie tight ends, like ever. You didn't see that out of Mark Andrews as a rookie. Like he had to develop that. Now, obviously, he was a good pass catcher. He could get open. But Greg Olson's talking about this guy, and he's like, wow. The way he's sitting in the zone. Because the first time it happened, he was like, man, that was pretty good. The way he sat in the soft spot of the zone, maybe he could step, maybe a foot back and, really secure that he's going to get the 1st down. But he's like, but that was a really good play right there. And then he just kept doing it. And Greg Olson's like, So this guy just keeps hitting that soft spot of the zone. He's really looking like a veteran tight end. And then you turn off, like if you don't watch where he lines up, he looks like a wide receiver half the time. Because that's where he was playing a lot of time in Coastal Carolina. He lined up out wide, like most tight ends do in college football. His touchdown was lined up from the slot. Lines up from the slot, runs a skinny post, or not a skinny post, but he runs kind of a deep slant or whatever you want to call it. Maybe it's an in route. Catches it. 4 guys around him, just falls forward and throws it in there. But he is someone where he gets the ball in his hands. And I told Matt this earlier today, and I was like, dude, I think he's a top 5 tight end in the NFL with the ball in his hands. I think Kittle's in a tier above everyone else. And then likely you just get the ball, and it's just like, why are people not able to tackle this guy? Because he's not moving super fast, but it's just like he knows where everyone is. He takes good angles, and he's able to wiggle, and he's able to be physical. And like he imposed his will and just dominated everyone else. And you're like, the announcers are watching, like Greg Olson's watching it. And I'm like, Greg Olson's a legend. I loved watching Greg Olson. I'm like, I never saw this out of Greg Olson. Like the after the catch aspect. And he already has the veteran savviness in terms of finding the soft spot in the zone. And now he gets to find the soft spot when everyone else is not trying to cover him because they're focused on Mark Andrews and stopping the run. He's going to be filthy. And the Ravens drafted another rookie tight end as well. They've only drafted 2 tight ends in the same draft 3 times. Who were the other tight ends they drafted in those? Dennis Pitta, Mark Andrews, and now Isaiah Likely. Maybe 3 of the best tight ends ever to play, potentially, for the Baltimore Ravens. They know what they're doing.
It's ridiculous, man. He's going to be a stud. I'm pumped.
Yeah, absolutely. But, we got a few minutes left. And guys, if you, haven't already, please go subscribe to AFS. We go live every Monday. We're not going to go live every Monday on TTB. So if you guys want to hear us talk overall NFL, talk about Ravens stuff, please. We're trying to hit 100 subs. That was our goal coming into the night. We were at like 85. So I'll throw the link in there. But let's get into the next section. Let's talk about, another underrated rookie. There's plenty of guys that people don't talk about. Or there's plenty of guys that people talk about, right? We've brought up Chris Olave. There's a ton of players, right? Kenneth Walker, Breece Hall, a lot of players. But there are some guys that nobody's really talking about, even at the running back position, that could really be impact players that aren't being mentioned whatsoever. So, Matt, what are you thinking in terms of other underrated rookies that could really play well in this rookie season?
So you started talking. I have 2 more guys to discuss. The first guy, running back. Second guy's a DN. So probably go to the running backs first, just because you led into it a little bit. But you brought up Breece Hall. You brought up Kenneth Walker. There's a guy that might start. There's a couple guys actually that might start. Damian Pierce might start. Brian Robinson might start. But one guy that he not really looked at as a starter, but there's kind of smoking with him, is Zamir White. Now, the Raiders just cut Kenyon Drake. Their starter is Josh Jacobs, right? Except for Josh Jacobs is getting preseason reps in the Hall of Fame game. They're running the ball with him a lot. He is not the guy that they should be looking to run the ball with. Now, I still think he's going to be used, but I think it's pretty clear that the future of the Raiders backfield is Zamir White, because they're not going to re-sign Josh Jacobs, and they're going to run the football a lot, and they're not going to run it with one running back. Zamir White was a stud at Georgia. He's extremely elusive. He sheds a ton of tackles. He's really quick through the hole. He has great vision. Josh McDaniels is going to have a lot of fun with Zamir White and Josh Jacobs this year. So Zamir White is a guy that I'm looking at. I'm going, damn, this guy is at the very least going to be a 2. And if he is a 2, he's not going to be a normal running back 2 for a team that has, let's say, a star running back like a Derrick Henry, or even like a Dalvin Cook, who doesn't play that. Like, he doesn't play like as much as like the other stars, right? No, they're going to use him like the Patriots have used their running backs year after year after year. And he is going to get a lot of carries. He is going to get a lot of reps, and he's going to have a significant role this season. They're going to have a sweet offense. They're going to be really good. Maybe defensively, we talked about that before, but it's a little up in the air. But in terms of their offense is going to be awesome. And Zamir White is going to be a focal part of that team. And he was a guy that was kind of not really thought of in any capacity to be a starter because Josh Jacobs was on that roster. So I expect him to play a significant role, and I'm looking forward to see how he plays this season.
Yeah, Zamir White, I wanted the Ravens to draft a running back this year. So I looked into a lot of the running back. I looked into James Cook. I looked into all of the Whites. I believe there were 3 that ended up getting drafted. I looked into Dameon Pierce. I looked into Isaiah Spiller. I even looked into Breece Hall and Kenneth Walker. I also looked into Brian Robinson, who was maybe my favorite rookie running back. Not the best rookie running back, but my favorite one coming out of the draft. But I loved what I saw out of Zamir White and him coming in, and the whole situation in Las Vegas now was, okay, we have Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs, I've talked about this before. I've talked about, before AFS, before, not on TTB, we would talk about, the Raiders and stuff like that. And I talked about how I felt like Josh Jacobs was the most overrated running back in the NFL. And I knew people, and they were like, no, Josh Jacobs, some point in his career, going to be a top 5 back. And I'm like, I don't know if Josh Jacobs will ever be a top 10 running back in the NFL. Now, is he a competent starter? Yes. I have no problems with saying that. But overall, he doesn't have breakaway speed. He's kind of just like, okay, I'll get you a couple of yards, and that's how you think of him. But he is the least efficient 1-yard run gainer in the NFL. Somehow, when it's like seen as like the only Josh Jacobs highlights you ever see is 1-yard line jumps over the offensive line. I swear this is the only highlight I ever see. And then you find out and he's like, yeah, he bats about 25% or something like that on 1-yard attempts on 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, and from the goal line and stuff like that. And you're like, why doesn't this work? That's what he should be good at. That's why you drafted him, was to be the short yardage chain mover. And then you get Zamir White, and it's like, wow, this guy's explosive. He can catch the ball. He's younger, and he's on contract for the next, 3 seasons. So why would they not try and use him? And also, we're getting a Patriots-based offense. I don't know about you guys, but I feel like I've seen some Patriot games in the last, 20 years of my life. I feel like it's never been one player running the football every single time. Not once. I don't care who was there, whether it was LeGarrette Blount back in, 2017. He was kind of the guy. It was never
Sony Michel.
Sony Michel. Yeah. It's always been a running back by committee because they just love all the different guys. It was James White. It was Brandon Bolden, who's actually on the roster now. It's last year even. Who was it? It was Damian. It was Damian. Can't even remember his last name.
Harris.
Damian Harris.
And Ramondre Stevenson's going to be this year.
Yeah, and Ramondre Stevenson.
But they're still going to use the other guys.
Yeah. And it's like they want to use him. Zamir White is going to become, he could come out and be the James White type of player potentially, maybe initially to kind of get some traction in the NFL, just to get him the ball in space. And then when they realize, hey, we don't really like Josh Jacobs because he's inefficient, and now the team is built around, kind of a passing offense. So because you have Devontae Adams and you have Darren Waller and you have Hunter Renfrow, it's going to open up the space. The linebacker, because you have to crowd the box. Why? Because Darren Waller's going in the middle. Hunter Renfrow's going in the middle. And they're running the football up the middle. Well, now they're like, oh, no, we have to cover Devontae Adams out the outside. So it's going to be more open in the box. It's going to be more space. Zamir White is going to be able to get the football, and he's going to make a lot of plays this year. Now, is he going to rush for 1,200 yards and put up 14 touchdowns? No, he is not. But he's going to be a player that you're going to be watching in Sunday Night Football, and maybe you bet against the Raiders, or maybe you've got Josh Jacobs in fantasy. I do not recommend that whatsoever. But you're going to be like, stop giving the ball to this dude. It's so annoying. He keeps making plays. That should be Jacobs yards, or stop getting yards on my team. Like, it's just going to be really frustrating because it's just going to keep happening, because every year we get these later round rookies that come in as running backs, and their, starting running back is maybe a little bit older, maybe not the guy that, teams initially want. And it may take a few weeks, but eventually they're going to become the starter. Look at the Baltimore Ravens. Look at Mark Ingram, the starting running back. Who do they draft? J.K. Dobbins, late 2nd round pick. And they're just going in there and they're like, hey, wait a minute. This Mark Ingram guy is kind of slow and he's not very explosive. Let's give it to this J.K. Dobbins guy because he's super explosive in space and can break tackles. That's going to be Zamir White for them. Oh, wow. We're not getting anything out of Josh Jacobs. We need someone to make an explosive play. Oh, let's give it to the explosive running back that we have on our roster.
Dude, he's quick. He has really good vision. He has really good vision. And I know George is really good too. So it's like, but like he sheds, he waits, he's very patient. I'm excited for it.
I'm definitely excited for it. But who's the next running back? Yeah.
No, not a running back. Not a running back.
Oh, last player, not a running back.
Last player, yeah. So final guy I want to bring up, Drake Jackson. You guys see the Niners stuff. Of course, I'm going to bring up a Niners guy. But the whole narrative of the offseason was, oh, the Niners traded all their picks. They don't have this draft capital, all that, right? They drafted a guy in Drake Jackson who's playing out of position at USC last year, and he is going to be an extremely impactful player for them as a rookie. This is a guy that could legitimately finish the year with 8 sacks. And that's not a stretch because basically all that the 49ers have said about him is, yeah, he looks like a first rounder. The Niners D-line coach, Chris Kocurek, he's known as one of the better defensive line coaches in the league, if not the best defensive line coach. Go look at his track record. He turns guys that are average players, and they consistently have career years with him all of the time. Ziggy Ansah is the best example of a guy that had like 2 good seasons, clearly because of Kocurek, and then kind of just fell off after he got paid, like after that. Like it was not the same guy. Drake Jackson is an insane athlete. He was playing outside linebacker. He was not playing his position last year. That's why he slid down in the draft, because his tape wasn't good, because he wasn't playing his position. He was playing about 30 pounds too light. He's about a 280 guy, and he was playing at 250, and he was playing outside backer. He still made a bunch of plays for the Trojans, but they just weren't very good. But now he's coming into the best spot you could come in as a defensive end, because his role is going to be passing down pass rusher off the edge, opposite Bosa's side. So you're going to have Bosa, Eric Armstead, who's an extremely slept-on player. Eric Armstead is an amazing D tackle when he plays D tackle. He plays both. He's super versatile. But when he's rushing from inside, he is an elite pass rusher from the inside. Then the guy next to him, and this is going to be a huge thing for the Niners if he's good, is Javon Kinlaw. The Niners don't need Kinlaw to have a bunch of sacks, right? He doesn't need to be a sack guy. He doesn't need to be a pass rush guy. But if he can get consistently double teamed and just bull rush through the middle, that other D end is going to be one-on-one every single play. There will not be one play because you have to you have to keep a tight end, you have to keep an extra guy in, and you're going to have to double. Like, it's going to be so impossible for offensive lines. And that's if you have 6 guys. Unless you decide, I'll just let Bosa go one-on-one on the other side. Yeah, sure, you could go ahead and do that. But I doubt that offenses are going to do that against the Niners that much. So that's the big thing. The other thing is he's not going to be a full-time starter. Samson Ebukam is going to be the starter at that defensive end spot. He is going to be the guy that comes in after him and plays about 45% of the snaps, 40% of the snaps. And he's going to consistently be fresh, and he's consistently going to be in one-on-ones on passing downs. This guy's pass rush arsenal is elite. Maybe not elite, but it's going to get there. He has a spin move. He's super athletic. He's super powerful. He's violent with his hands. He spin moves. He gets really fast. He has great bend. He is going to be a stud pass rusher. And every once in a while, a guy slides into the 2nd round or 3rd round that's a pass rusher, but it's usually pretty rare. This past NFL draft class was so deep at D-line that it allowed guys to be in this spot. So Drake Jackson, get ready. He's going to have a fantastic rookie season. He's going to have a bunch of sacks. And he's going to be a guy that's going to look really good and be really important for this 49ers team.
Yeah, I mean, Ravens fan here. What do we need? We need edge rushers. I went into the NFL draft and I did a lot of scouting. I looked at wide receivers. I looked at running backs. I looked at cornerbacks. And I looked at edge rushers. Drake Jackson was consistently my 2nd-round pick in mock drafts. Anytime I could get Drake Jackson, if I didn't get a 1st-round pass rusher, I was taking Drake Jackson. Why? Because I recognize that this dude is just a freak. He was my I'll say 2nd favorite 2nd-round pass rusher because David Ojabo got injured and became a 2nd-round pass rusher, but David Ojabo's not going to have an impact really his rookie season. So when you're looking at even just all of the rookie 1st-round pass rushers, maybe outside of the guys taken in the top 10, he's coming into a situation where he is going to dominate. And we're going to see a lot of highlights of him. And the one thing that I always said when I was looking at Drake Jackson highlights was, if he needs, the only question that I have is, he's really thin right now. He needs to bulk up a little bit. And Matt, like you said, he's playing about 30 pounds, under what he should be. I mean, the way that he was even playing, even when he was playing underweight, it was still like, you can tell this dude is really good. And I saw so many people that were like, I don't like Drake Jackson. And I'm like, why don't you like Drake Jackson? This dude looks like he's going to be a monster. Like, the way that he's able to be a freak athlete, way to go, Matt, right there. The way that he was able to just dominate over at USC in a system that wasn't built for him. And now he gets to come in, and Matt, I agree, he's in the best situation to come in. Like, imagine if Kayvon Thibodeau or Walker or Aiden Hutchinson came into the San Francisco 49ers organization. What happened when the last time a top 3 or top 10 draft pick that was an edge rusher came into San Francisco? What happened that year? What did they set the Super Bowl record for pressures in a single game? Because, the rest of the defensive line was filthy and they were able to just completely dominate everyone else? Oh, yeah, that was Nick Bosa. Well, now Nick Bosa is still on this roster. Like you said, Armstead switching over to the middle. I know he's not the same guy as the man over in Indianapolis.
Defo.
But it's still going to be filthy. And
they're also way deeper. And, that's the thing. I don't think people realize, if you're a defensive lineman and you're fresh, the offensive line doesn't sub out. So they're going to get worn out. If you're consistently having fresh bodies in, and so on the most impactful downs, on when it's clear passing downs, you always have your best pass rushers in, that goes a long way. And that's why for him, say Bosa came out on second down because the Niners have a ton of depth and they bring someone else at edge and let's say they take Armstead and Bosa out on a second and long, right? And they both miss that play, and then those guys both come back in. You can't just go one-on-one with those guys. Armstead, I think, over the past 5 seasons, leads the entire NFL in double team rate or something like that. He's one of them. It's absurd how much he gets doubled. And then Bosa, you're gonna have a tight end or a running back either chip or stay and block or whatever it is, and then that's gonna leave that other tackle very, very vulnerable on the other side. And that's why you a guy like this that's just really athletic, gonna be consistently fresh. Those are the guys that are gonna have the big rookie seasons. It's not gonna be Thibodeau. He's already hurt. He plays on a team that's not very good. He doesn't have as much help on the D-line. He's not going to be the guy that ends up getting the most sacks as a rookie. Now, down the road, they build around him. They have some other pieces. He's healthy. Of course, he can be great. But it's going to be a lot harder for some of these early picks that are on a Jags defense or a Giants defense.
Unless you come into Chase Young came in and they had a great defensive line. Bosa came in, they had a great defensive line. Other Bosa came in, they had Melvin Ingram. When the edge rushers win, it's because they came into an established line. It's very rare where, I highly doubt we see Walker come in and just be like, oh yeah, this guy's just the best guy in the NFL.
And he might look like it, but he's not going to produce that kind of way because he's going to get doubled if he looks good.
Exactly. I think those are 3 guys that are super underrated and likely is finally starting to get talked about because just put up the best preseason performance I've ever seen. And it was on national television on Fox. But guys, thank you so much for coming through to the stream. We stream, Matt and I do football every Monday. Matt also does Friar Talk Tuesday typically. I do NBA on Wednesday. We're trying to get a fantasy show typically on Friday. We also talk about college football. So, if you guys aren't subscribed over on AFS, would really appreciate if you guys checked out over there. If you're watching on TTB, it would really help us out trying to get to 100 because then you can have the custom URL. So it can just be youtube.com/c/America's Finest Sports. But, that's it from us, I believe. Thank you guys so much for coming through. Had a ton of fun. Got to talk about the Ravens, got to talk about Isaiah Likely. And it's really exciting. There's one more game in the rest of preseason for our favorite teams. So then all of a sudden it's going to be week 1 and it's going to be a lot of fun. As long as people are healthy. I do not want to have another season like last year.